Hi, I'm Lori from Foxy's Quilt Company, and this is Sunday from the Sewing Room, where we share tips, tricks, and a few tutorials to help you with your sewing and quilting projects. If you like our videos, please hit that subscribe button below. Today, I'm going to talk to you about diagonal seam tape. So this is the diagonal seam tape. It's from Cluck Sew, and it's basically like washi tape. So what you're going to do, and you're going to see that there are different lines on here. And we've got the red one, which is going to be obviously the center line, and then the black lines are 1/4 inch on each side. And so what this does is it's going to help you with making half square triangles, flying geese, stitch and flip, all the different times when a pattern asks you to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of your pieces, and then you're going to sew on that line. So what the diagonal seam tape does is it allows you to use the tape as your guide instead of having to draw all those lines. So it's going to save you a lot of time. So the neat thing about the diagonal seam tape is that you're going to take a strip of it, you're going to tear it off. It's very easy to tear. And the thing is, you don't want to leave this on your sewing machine all the time. So I'm going to use this little strip, put it on here, and then, maybe after a week or so, I'm going to pull it off. And it usually does not leave any kind of sticky residue. But the type of tape it is, you can just put it on there for a while, pull it off, and then when you're ready, just rip off another piece. I've had this for quite a while, and you don't go through it all that fast. It just depends on how you use it. But anyway, so needless to say, I'm going to put this down here, and what you're going to find is that you don't want it to go, I don't want it to go underneath my feet, but I'm going to put my foot down, my presser foot, and you're going to see that the red line, this red line, center line, needs to line up with my needle. So it needs to be in the center of my foot and on my plate here. So I'm going to line this up. So that way, when I'm using these different lines, my 1/4 inch marks, this is the center, and I'm just going to follow along here. Now, when you're putting this tape on your plate, or on your machine here, you do have to be extremely careful that you get this lined up. And what I do is I take my ruler, and I'm just going to make sure that I've got it lined up, my 1/4 inch, and then as I go down, I want it to be nice and straight. So if we just take a scrap piece of fabric, and I want to make sure that I've got this lined up, my red line, nice and straight, so that when I use it, it's going to work well for me. So now that we have our diagonal seam tape on our machine, we're ready to do some stitching. So if we're going to do, say, if you're doing a snowball, what we're going to do is you're going to line up. Normally you would draw a line from one point to the other, and then you would sew on it. And what this diagonal seam tape is going to do is it allows you to start at each point. You're going to line up the point with the red line, and you're just going to stitch right across here. Keeping this corner on the red line, and as you stitch, then it makes your snowball right here. And so I just was able to use my diagonal seam tape. If I'm going to do a stitch and flip, same thing. Now, the only limitation that you might have is if your squares or your piece of fabric is bigger than what this is. But you can see I've stuck that underneath my presser foot. I'm right on the red line, and I'm just going to stitch right along here. And I can just go right along, and I can chain piece. The other thing that this works for is if you're putting your binding together. So you're going to take your 2 binding pieces, and a lot of times you'll draw that diagonal line again in order to stitch your binding pieces together. I'm going to put that corner under there. Here's my other point, and I'm going to line these up, and I'm just going to follow right along, keeping it on the red line, and I've sewn my binding pieces together. So now they're ready to go. And I'm just going to open it up, and I've got my binding ready. Okay? The last one I want to show you is if you're doing half square triangles. usually when you make half square triangles, you can do it a couple different ways. You can either draw a diagonal line from point to point, and then you're going to sew a 1/4 inch on each side, or you can draw a line on both sides and stitch on the lines. If you're using diagonal seam tape, all you need to do is you could draw a line if you wanted to, point to point. And if you did that, then you would put the line here on the black line, and you're going to stay even with your red line. So when you're sewing your half square triangles, you're going to be going right along this black line, so that way you're sewing a 1/4 inch over. So now if I'm going to do my, oops, excuse me, if I'm going to go around and do the other side, again, I'm putting this on my black line, my point to point on my black line, and then that way I'm sewing. So I sewed the 1/4 inch off the middle on this side. Now I'm going to put the point here again, and I've got it up there on the black since I'm doing my half square triangles, and I'm going to keep the point on my black line, and that way I'm sewing a 1/4 inch. So when I finish, now I have my 2 half square triangles, and my next step then is going to be to cut right down here, and I'm going to have my 2 half square triangles ready to go, and I didn't have to draw any lines. Okay, so that's the beauty of using this diagonal seam tape, is that it alleviates your need to have to draw all those diagonal lines. It might say, okay, draw 36 diagonal lines on the wrong side of it, wrong side of your fabric. Now you don't have to do that. The diagonal seam tape works great, saves you a lot of time, and it's a fun tool to use. So don't forget to pick up some diagonal seam tape at Fox City's Quilt Company. If you have any questions, call us at the store. But we're so glad for joining you for Sunday in the Sewing Room. Thank you. So this is Lori from Fox City's Quilt Company. Thank you for watching.